Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named Goosebumps Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins on an ordinary day off in 1993 when a teenage boy, Harold, was in his basement crafting a scrapbook. He had a passion for horror and the bizarre, often losing himself in his artwork all day long until a sudden ring of the doorbell interrupted his concentration. Harold hurried to check the door but found no one in the yard. As he was about to go back to his basement, the doorbell rang again, and the chandelier behind him crashed down violently, plunging the entire house into darkness. Harold quickly lit a candle and nervously scanned his surroundings. The wall clock on one side began to chime incessantly. Holding the candle, Harold took shelter in the basement when suddenly someone pounded on the door. Startled, he tumbled down the stairs. The candle fell and ignited the floor, unleashing a torrent of flames that engulfed the room. Time flies, and in the blink of an eye, it was 2023. Nathan, a school teacher, had become the new owner of this abandoned house, something he could never have dreamed of, acquiring a house for free. It was said that after the previous owner perished in a fire, his parents mysteriously disappeared. The house had stood empty for 30 years. Being the only relative of the former owner, Nathan inherited the house. A construction worker was in charge of renovating the entire building. He mentioned that it would still take some time before one could move in. At that moment, Nathan noticed the locked basement and wanted to go down to check it out, but the construction worker said that the door was jammed shut. Upon hearing this, Nathan picked up an iron bar and tried to pry the lock open. Unexpectedly, the lock remained closed, and he also cut his hand. As the construction worker helped Nathan to treat the wound, the blood that had fallen to the ground formed a line and seeped into the keyhole, and the closed wooden door opened as a result. Well, it seems like this was some kind of genetic lock. At night, a car pulled up to the cabin, and out stepped 3 high school students. The leader, Isaiah, was the son of the construction worker. He'd heard from his dad that the cabin would be deserted until the new owner moved in, so he thought it'd be the perfect spot to throw a makeup party for his girlfriend. The trio knew that someone had died there before. It seemed like the ideal creepy vibe for a Halloween party. Isaiah quickly set up the colored lights, but the power tripped out in the next second. They whipped out their flashlights to look for the fuse box, but then the basement door creaked open. As they cautiously approached, a figure emerged. It turned out to be Margot, their classmate. The girlfriend shot Isaiah a glare, not understanding why he'd invite the bookish Margot, who also happened to be their teacher's daughter. Actually, Isaiah had recently begged Margot to help him cheat on a history test so he could keep his spot in the upcoming football game. He'd casually invited her to the party and then forgotten all about it. To his surprise, Margot actually showed up, but since she was there already, they couldn't just send her away. Determined to find the fuse box, Isaiah decided to venture into the basement. The ominous space gave him the creeps. That's when he found an old camera. Absorbed in his find, the basement door suddenly slammed shut, trapping him inside. The others tried to open the door, but it was jammed. They were staring intently at the basement when Isaiah popped out with the camera. Isaiah's girlfriend scolded him for his tasteless prank, but Isaiah explained that it was an old camera that required processing to see the images. Then, the lights in the house came back on, which puzzled him. Since he hadn't found the fuse box, he wondered how the power would restore itself. Soon, other people arrived for the party. Margot felt out of place. She was there because she had a crush on Isaiah, but he spent all his time with his girlfriend. Lucas, a classmate, noticed Margot's mood and came over to chat her up. Margot knew Lucas liked her, but she couldn't respond. She didn't want to stay any longer and said her goodbyes to Isaiah before leaving the party. No sooner had Margot left than the homeowner, Nathan, entered the room. He warned everyone to leave immediately or he'd call the police. The guests scattered, and Isaiah's girlfriend, following the crowd, ended up in the woods where she saw a long-haired figure. Thinking it was someone from the party, she asked for directions back to the main road. The figure remained silent, which scared her, and she turned to leave, but the mysterious figure appeared again. She screamed in a chicken voice and ran like a broken Tesla bike, but the long-haired man suddenly materialized in front of her, bursting into flames. The girl collapsed in terror, but fortunately, Isaiah heard his girlfriend's chicken scream and arrived just in time to help her out of the woods. The day after the incident, Isaiah's girlfriend took a few days off school. Meanwhile, Isaiah was chatting with a friend when he spotted Nathan. He quickly averted his gaze, hoping not to be recognized. To his surprise, Nathan called out his name the next second. It turned out Isaiah had left his backpack in Nathan's house that day. Isaiah awkwardly thanked him, saying it was kind of Nathan to bring it all the way. Nathan mentioned he was heading to work anyway. As it turned out, Nathan was the new English teacher of this high school. Isaiah realized he couldn't escape now. Fortunately, Nathan was easy to talk to. He warned Isaiah not to sneak into his house again, and they could put the matter behind them. Relieved, Isaiah opened his backpack and found the photos from the previous night. But shockingly, the photos showed his girlfriend and Margot in deathly poses, which left him confused. Elsewhere, Margot was buying an energy bar from a vending machine when she noticed a long-haired man in the hallway. She asked if he needed anything, but he remained silent. Then the school bell rang, and students flooded the hallway with the mysterious man disappearing amongst them. Suddenly, Margot had trouble breathing. Her usual snack had nuts in it, to which she was severely allergic. Thankfully, Isaiah arrived in time. He took the epinephrine from Margot's bag and administered the injection. Afterwards, Isaiah compared the clothes in the photos with what Margot was wearing and realized they matched perfectly. In other words, if he hadn't arrived in time, Margot could have suffocated from the allergic reaction, and the night before, his girlfriend had faced a life-threatening situation in the forest. So he realized that there must be something wrong with the camera from the basement. Isaiah wanted to tell his buddy James about it, but the photos turned blank. James thought it was a prank and snatched the camera to take a picture of Isaiah before driving off. Isaiah looked at the newly taken photo and saw himself lying on the football field with his entire left arm severed at the elbow. He didn't know what to do next and decided to seek Margot's help. Isaiah had to play in the game to attract scouts and secure a scholarship, but no one else could see the mysterious injury in the photo. When Margot found out why Isaiah had come, she was disappointed. She thought he was concerned about her allergy, but he was just there for help again. It seemed Isaiah only remembered Margot when he was in trouble. They parted on bad terms, and Isaiah, at a loss for solutions, decided to smash and burn the camera. Resolved, he stepped onto the playing field. Throughout the first half, he played with unstoppable momentum, leading his team in a game where the opponents were thoroughly disoriented. But during halftime, Isaiah discovered the camera in his locker and panic set in. Hallucinations started creeping up on him. Isaiah saw his teammates and the referees all take on the appearance of the long-haired man, who was none other than Harold, the one burned to death in that house. The whole stadium seemed to be engulfed in flames, and the football melted from the intense heat, sticking stubbornly to his hand. But to everyone else, nothing was amiss. Only Isaiah struggled alone in the midst of these visions. All the players turned into burning zombies, charging madly at Isaiah. In the end, he fell to the ground with a broken arm. Although his arm was saved, Isaiah would miss the entire season, and his scholarship hopes were dashed. At that moment, the town's restaurant owner came to the hospital. She pulled Isaiah's father into the hallway for a conversation, telling him that she had seen Harold at the stadium. She deduced that the dead boy had come for vengeance. It seemed the adults were hiding something. Meanwhile, Nathan was sitting at home when the fireplace suddenly went out. As he got up to check, he found Harold standing in front of him, who then turned into a thick smoke and entered Nathan's body. Time flashes back to the time before the group's Halloween party. At this high school, besides prominent figures like Isaiah, there were also less noticeable characters. Isabella was the most invisible among them. Although she was an assistant to the football team, she was ignored by all the players, including the coach. Before class, Isabella saw Margot arguing with her father and tried to comfort her, but Margot left as if she didn't see Isabella at all. Frustrated, Isabella sighed and headed upstairs to class, nearly getting knocked over by Lucas. Holding back her anger, she walked into the classroom, only to be bumped into by Isaiah's girlfriend. Isabella's pent-up emotions were about to explode. Coincidentally, Isaiah's girlfriend was chatting with a friend about throwing a party while the parents were away. Isabella overheard and immediately sent a private message to the girl's parents to snitch. This was why the party venue was changed to Nathan's house. Isabella had intended to ruin that Halloween party too, but her brother persuaded Isabella to join in instead. Perhaps by taking the initiative to integrate, she could escape her invisible status. Isabella thought it made sense, so she decided to give it a try. Dressed as a vampire, she entered the venue, only to find Isaiah's girlfriend and her group laughing at her. Isabella, plagued by a strong sense of inferiority, immediately sought refuge in a deserted spot to compose herself. Unexpectedly, the basement door creaked open, and a voice called out to Isabella. Gathering her courage, she descended into the basement, following the sound to find a mask. Shockingly, the mask urged her to put it on because she deserved to be seen. Isabella took a deep breath and donned the mask, which led to a complete transformation in her demeanor. She shed her cloak, revealing her fine figure, no longer timid and drawing the attention of everyone. After the party, she joyfully ran home, only to discover the mask was difficult to remove. However, Isabella didn't dwell on it. She lay in bed, laughing heartily, reminiscing about the party. The mask she tossed aside also bore a sinister grin. The next day, Isabella went to school as usual, but heard the mask's call before leaving. After hesitating, she packed the mask in her bag. The scene shifts back to the present timeline. Teacher Nathan woke from his sleep, seemingly having forgotten the events of the previous night. Glancing at the time, he hurried out to work. His limbs, however, seemed to have a mind of their own, causing much amusement along the way. Stumbling into the restroom, he saw Harold in the mirror. It appeared Harold had possessed and taken control of Nathan. On the other side, Isaiah was troubled by an injury. Margot set aside their past differences and approached to apologize. Isaiah, however, remained silent about the incident on the soccer field. With things having gone this far, he didn't want to drag Margot into it and decided to seek the truth alone. He went to the school to ask Isabella for the video of the day's match, mistakenly calling her by the wrong name during the exchange. Isabella didn't mind and took Isaiah to the editing room before leaving. No sooner had she left than she saw Lucas had damaged her expensive drone. The school counselor called them to the office to negotiate. Lucas didn't have much money and proposed to pay $5 weekly until the debt was settled. Given Isabella's usual temperament, she would have reluctantly agreed to the terms, but this time, the mask in her bag egged her on to resist. So she mustered the courage to reject the counselor's suggestion, stating that the drone is worth $3,000 and it would take a long time to pay off at $5 a week. The counselor felt Isabella was too harsh and tried to reprimand her, only to be retorted by Isabella saying that his life being a counselor is just a failure. Midway through her rant, Isabella suddenly came to her senses, quickly apologized to the counselor, and even waived Lucas's compensation. As punishment for damaging the drone, Isabella was grounded by her mother, confined to the house with all her electronics confiscated. During this time, the mask seized the opportunity to bewitch Isabella, promising a resolution to her predicament. Meanwhile, the school counselor couldn't let a student suffer such a financial loss and had to negotiate with Lucas's mother, who happened to be the restaurant owner as shown earlier. An unspoken tension lingered between the counselor and this parent, a hint of something more than professional. After the counselor left, teacher Nathan, now possessed by Harold, showed up under the guise of buying bread. His real motive, however, was to probe Lucas's mother about the fire, an event that she found unnaturally difficult to discuss. It was revealed that the accident 30 years ago wasn't just a chance occurrence, and she had been troubled by it ever since. Deciding to talk to Isaiah, she was about to retrieve something from her bag when Isaiah's father diverted his son and warned her not to drag the child into this mess before retreating to his room. Lucas's mother then caught Margot passing by and handed her a photo of Harold from her bag, asking Margot to inquire if Isaiah recognized the young man in the picture. That evening, Margot went to Isaiah, who immediately identified the man in the photo as the stranger from the soccer field. They planned to confront Lucas's mother for clarity, but she had already finished work. Instead, they found Lucas skateboarding nearby. He accidentally kicked his board into the shadows. It was picked up by Isabella, wearing the mask, who then threw it forcefully at Lucas. With a sinister smile, she closed in and proceeded to beat him fiercely. As Isabella's face began to merge with the mask, she was about to deliver another blow when she was interrupted by Isaiah's girlfriend. To avoid revealing her identity, Isabella quickly fled. Back home, she continued to embody the monster persona. Her little brother sensed an intruder and hurriedly called his sister for help, only to hear the ringtone coming from the figure in black. He hid in the storeroom, but Isabella followed. The little boy recognized her, dressed in his sister's clothes. He kept shouting Isabella's name. Fortunately, Isabella came to her senses. She desperately tore off the mask, regaining her normal self. The next day, the siblings threw the mask into the river, determined to forget the bizarre events. Meanwhile, the children's parents gathered at James's house to discuss the possibility of Harold's return. Isabella and James were hiding in the house playing pool. After Isabella took a shot, James suddenly burst open, spewing a pool of yellow slime. What exactly had happened to him would have to be traced back to that Halloween party. James is a very special kid. He's a transgender person who transitioned from female to male. Lately, he's been head over heels for a classmate. James came to the party specifically to get closer to him, but the classmate was cold towards him, which left James feeling down. As he left the party, he unexpectedly ran into an invisible barrier. When he picked himself up, totally confused, he found that time had rolled back an hour, and James was stuck in a loop, unable to leave the party. Despite several attempts, nothing worked. Only the wall clock kept chiming, its hands relentlessly moving backward. James could only sit at the party, staring into space, until the classmates surprisingly came over to chat. Seizing the moment, James thought he could use the time loop to his advantage, chatting with his crush repeatedly to learn his interests and win his attention. This tactic was incredibly successful, and the classmate even thought he'd found his soulmate. He invited James to leave the party with him. Eager to break the cycle, James quickly sabotaged the wall clock, then stepped out of the cabin. To his amazement, it worked. He escaped the party and got closer to his crush, but the trouble soon followed. When James woke up, he found his house filled with his clones. It turned out that each trip through the time tunnel had created a new version of himself. Even worse, a clone knocked James out and trapped him in an abandoned mine. So whether it was the James playing pool or the one attending school, they were all fakes from the time tunnel, each with their own personality. One clone even broke up with the classmate on his own and stirred up trouble between Isaiah and his girlfriend, suggesting that Isaiah was always with Margot. The sudden change in behavior went unnoticed by James's friends and mother until Isabella burst one of the fakes, exposing the imposter. But the parents didn't believe Isabella's story. The only solution was to let others see for themselves. So Isabella took her chance and burst another clone in front of Isaiah and Margot. Margot explained everything, including the mysterious mask. All the strange incidents were connected to Harold's house. After that, the trio went to Lucas's mom, wanting to know the truth. But the parents had just had a meeting and decided not to involve the kids, so she was reluctant to say more. She only hinted that if they really wanted to know the truth, they should ask Margot's mother. However, Margot's parents were having marital problems and living apart. Margot didn't want to bother her mother, so they decided to stake out at James's house, hoping to track down the original James from the copies. They followed the trail to the old mine, but the whole process seemed a little too easy, making them suspect a trap. Sure enough, lights came on in the mine shaft, and a mining cart came roaring toward them. They wanted to turn and run, but they were blocked by a group of clones. Just then, a clone of James pointed the way out for the trio. Just as the group thought he was the original, another James appeared, both claiming to be the real one. Isaiah couldn't tell them apart and decided to swing a stick at them, but the problem was, there wasn't a real James there at all. The clones took the opportunity to knock Isaiah out and throw him into the mine shaft. James was thrilled to see his good friend, but Isaiah, thinking he was another clone, punched him. This time, surprisingly, there was no explosion. Isaiah immediately apologized to his real friend. Just then, a wall suddenly collapsed. It was Margot. Following her chicken voice, the two found their way back to their friends. Just as Isaiah and James were about to leave the mine, they were blocked by a group of clones. It looked like a confrontation was inevitable. Though the clones seemed intimidating, they burst upon impact, smelling faintly of watermelon gummies and not very formidable in combat. So with little effort, Isaiah and James dispatched them and escaped from the mine. After this incident, Margot mustered the courage to contact her mother, who decided to return to town upon hearing her daughter mention Harold, promptly hanging up the phone. Meanwhile, Margot's dad was having an affair with Lucas's mom. Their secret relationship had been going on for a while. Since Lucas's mom was a widow and Margot's dad was about to divorce his wife, they were just waiting for the right moment to go public. At that moment, Margot's dad was driving Lucas's mom home, and they shared a kiss without using their tongues in front of the restaurant, unaware that Lucas had witnessed the smelly scene and secretly recorded it. Lucas couldn't accept their fishy romance. He hadn't moved on from the loss of his father, and now his mother had found new love. Feeling down, he went to class and sought out Margot, wanting to talk as they could potentially become step-siblings. Lucas showed Margot the video from the morning, leaving her disappointed. She couldn't believe her father would betray her mother. Seeing Margot upset, Lucas tried to cheer her up by introducing her to his pet, a bunch of wriggling earthworms he had brought back from the previous Halloween party. He picked up a worm and pretended to swallow it, but to his surprise, the earthworm actually crawled into his mouth. Margot was both disgusted and concerned, urging him to go to the hospital. Lucas assured her it was no big deal, joking that worms are a good source of protein. Thanks to this odd turn of events, Margot's mood improved significantly. She said goodbye to Lucas and left. That night, Lucas went to bed early, but the earthworms in the glass tank went into a frenzy. They managed to push the lid off and crawled towards Lucas, making their way into his mouth and his smelly parts. The next day, Lucas got up as if nothing had happened. His mom handed him a breakfast sandwich, but after one bite, he realized it tasted off and tossed it into the trash can. Just as he was about to leave, he couldn't resist the pull of the kitchen waste. The earthworms inside him had changed his dietary preferences. He found himself even devouring lettuce leaves and soil. Additionally, Lucas's body underwent changes. He had acquired the regenerative abilities of earthworms. Even a severed finger could heal rapidly. On the other side, Isaiah's girlfriend returned to school and noticed that Isaiah and Margot were growing closer, which made her jealous. Isaiah, not wanting her involved, revealed that Margot had helped him cheat as a diversion, explaining that this was why they were closely interacting. Unaware of Isaiah's intentions, the girlfriend immediately reported to a teacher that Margot had been assisting others in cheating. Isaiah was still in the dark about the situation when he saw Lucas passing by on an off-road motorcycle, which sparked his curiosity. He approached Margot to ask about the previous day's events and Lucas's odd behavior. Margot suddenly remembered that the worms Lucas had eaten came from Harold's house and wondered if the worms were the issue. She was about to call Lucas when her dad summoned her to his office for a talk, undoubtedly about the cheating incident. In anger, Margot confronted her father about his affair, and they argued. Amidst the argument, the sound of a motorcycle was heard outside. It was Lucas, attempting to jump the building on his Tesla bike. His father, a motorcycle stuntman who had died performing a stunt, had left an uncompleted legacy that Lucas wanted to fulfill. Luckily, he only broke an arm this time. Margot offered to take him to the hospital, but Lucas shockingly reattached his arm and showed her his healing wound, underneath which Margot could see wriggling little worms under his skin. Realizing the severity of the problem, Margot rushed to inform Lucas's mother. Upon hearing that her son had taken the motorcycle, she knew where he might be headed, the place where Lucas's father had died. Lucas's mom stopped her impulsive son, explaining that she had already lost her husband and couldn't bear to lose her son in the same way. She revealed that her late husband had left a suicide note before the fatal stunt, which she had hidden from her son, telling him that his father had died in pursuit of a challenge. Upon hearing this, Lucas vomited a mass of earthworms, narrowly saving his own life. Suddenly, the ground shook as the earthworms formed into a giant monster. Realizing they wanted to return to his body, Lucas sped down the mountain on his motorcycle, with the earthworm monster in hot pursuit. Margot and her companion followed in their car. Lucas floored the throttle and all three raced into a factory, barricading the door behind them. However, the fragile iron door could not hold for long, and the earthworm monster broke through. In a moment of crisis, Margot activated the slicing machine. Lucas lured the monster onto the conveyor belt, where the massive gears ground the earthworms into a pulp, averting the crisis. The police quickly responded to the scene upon hearing the news. Lucas's mom urged the children to leave quickly, choosing to stay behind and deal with the situation herself. However, the police didn't believe the monster story and even suspected Lucas's mom was mentally ill, so they took her to the hospital for observation. Meanwhile, teacher Nathan entered the factory and was heartbroken to see the remnants of the earthworms. He was determined to avenge his little pets. Since the incident, Lucas's mom had been kept under hospital observation, so Margot's dad decided to take Lucas into their home for care. Soon after, Margot's mom, Sarah, returned home, and the atmosphere at the dinner table that evening was incredibly awkward. Margot had many questions for her mom, but couldn't find the right moment to talk in detail, wanting to avoid her father. Later that night, Margot and Lucas went to James's house for a meeting where Isaiah and others had already arrived. Isaiah had broken up with his girlfriend because of the snitching incident, which delighted James. He'd always felt that Isaiah and Margot were a perfect match. In fact, Isaiah had harbored feelings for Margot over the years, and now he finally had a chance to pursue her. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. During the time Margot spent with Lucas, she had begun to see his good qualities, and unable to contain her feelings, she impulsively kissed Lucas. After arriving at James's house, Margot explained that her mom wasn't willing to say much, and that she'd probably have to stick to going to school and look for opportunities to uncover more information later. But trouble always seemed to find its way to her. While Margot was studying in the library one day, teacher Nathan came over and mentioned that he had found a scrapbook while cleaning the basement, which contained photos of Margot's mom. He wanted Margot to give it to her mother. Out of curiosity, Margot opened the scrapbook and was instantly transported to the year 1993. There, she saw her mother inviting Harold to the photography studio. The next moment, the librarian's voice brought Margot back to reality. The images were still vivid in her mind, so she decided to visit the school's photography club, which had since been transformed into a recording studio. Margot closed the door and opened the scrapbook again, indeed seeing the photography club from 1993, with Harold showing her mother how to develop photos. The two seemed to have a good relationship back then. Margot quickly gathered her friends to share what had just happened. She theorized that by returning to the location recorded in the scrapbook and opening the corresponding pages, they would be able to see the events of 1993. She tested this theory at the theater, and as expected, she saw her mother and Harold on stage. Harold appeared very frightened, insisting that something was going to harm him. But at that time, Margot's mom, Sarah, was in a hurry for a date with her boyfriend and didn't take Harold's concerns seriously. Annoyed, Harold tightly gripped her hand. The girl angrily shook him off and left the theater. Suddenly, Harold looked towards Margot, trapping her in the illusion of the scrapbook. Isaiah and the others realized something was wrong when they saw Margot with pitch-black eyes, frantically flipping through the scrapbook until it landed on the page about Harold's house. It was clear that to save Margot, they needed to head to Harold's house and enter the illusion. At that moment, the ghostly Harold stood with Margot in the yard, pointing towards the cabin. Several people dressed in black were deliberately ringing the doorbell, luring Harold from the basement to the door, then stealthily sneaking inside. This was the very scene from the beginning of the drama. Margot watched as those people intentionally tormented Harold, frightening him into running back into the basement. In the next second, she became the person tumbling into the basement. Just as Margot was about to meet the same grim fate as Harold had years ago, Isaiah and the others successfully entered the illusion and safely extracted her from the cabin. They were all coughing on the grass when the pranksters also ran out of the house. Seeing the house on fire, they were in a panic, quickly removing their hats. To Margot and her friends' shock, they realized the pranksters were their parents. This childish and cruel prank had resulted in Harold being burned alive. After that, the instigators, carrying a mysterious box, covered up the true story and left. The group suspected their parents might be the murderers, but Margot always felt there was more to the story, especially since Harold had mentioned someone was out to get him. They couldn't help but wonder what was in the mysterious box their parents held. Nathan, standing at the door, urged them to come inside if they wanted to know what's inside the box. The story goes back to 1925. Nathan's grandfather was a magician in New York chasing his dreams. However, in the big city, where novelty is always in demand, his magic quickly became obsolete. To introduce new acts, the grandfather wanted to buy expensive magic props, but he was short on funds and couldn't afford anything. At his wit's end, the grandfather came across an old wooden box. He spent all his cash on it and went home to show his wife. Inside the box was a puppet named Slappy. His wife didn't understand his actions and wanted him to give up being a magician. The grandfather ignored his wife's complaints and contentedly fiddled with Slappy. Inside the puppet's pocket, he found a note and read the strange incantation on it. Slappy had no reaction, but the moment the grandfather turned away, the little puppet came to life. At the performance the next day, Grandpa took to the stage with Slappy and clumsily dropped the cards. To everyone's surprise, Slappy started to speak, making the audience think it was part of a ventriloquist act, oblivious to any error. Confused and alarmed, Grandpa didn't know what to do, but Slappy reassured him to trust and finish the show properly. This incident made Slappy the best magic partner Grandpa could have ever asked for, reviving his act from the ashes. They became a sensation, sweeping through New York and even performing for the president at the White House. But by 1960, the public had grown tired of puppet magic, and Grandpa faced a crisis with the theater manager wanting to reduce his shows. Slappy cunningly convinced Grandpa to deal with the manager and not let anyone destroy their magnificent act. Under Slappy's influence, Grandpa cast a spell, turning the manager into a puppet. However, Slappy's help wasn't without a price. He had Grandpa dig up a wooden box with a more powerful curse inside from a graveyard. Upon touching it, Grandpa saw a vision of a building on fire. Slappy forced him to chant a spell to turn the vision into reality. It was then that Grandpa realized he was under the puppet's spell, so he locked Slappy in the box. 2 weeks later, Nathan's grandpa arrived at Lawrence Port and bought a cottage to spend his twilight years. He sealed the suitcase within the walls, hoping the puppet would sleep forever. In 1993, Harold's parents inherited the same property, moving into this spacious house. Harold was an oddball, fond of keeping insects as pets, and had been bullied at his previous school. Having moved and transferred schools, his parents hoped for a change. His dad even gifted him an instant camera and suggested he join the school's photography club to make friends. Heeding his father's advice, Harold signed up at the club's booth where he met Sarah, Margot's mother. They shared the same hobbies, often developing photos together in the darkroom. Sarah, thinking Harold was too reclusive, invited him to a weekend party. Harold initially didn't want to go, but was persuaded by Sarah's repeated requests. However, come Sunday night, after trying on various outfits and looking at himself in the mirror, he felt an inexplicable sense of dejection. Harold felt that no matter what he wore, he'd still be the same, and Sarah would never like him. In the end, he stood her up and didn't go to the party. Sullen and self-loathing, Harold stayed in the basement, where in a fit of anger he threw things around and accidentally discovered the suitcase. Harold was fond of Slappy and quickly found the note hidden beneath the puppet's clothes. He read the spell out loud without much thought and unwittingly awakened Slappy. Unaware of the secret behind it, Harold carried the case to school the next day, only to be stopped by his parents. They were worried that their son's puppet would be ridiculed by his classmates and wanted him to leave Slappy at home. Harold explained that everyone had to perform in drama class, and he could use Slappy for a ventriloquism act. His parents watched him leave with heavy hearts, fearing that he would be regarded as an oddity by his peers. Later in the school's drama class, Harold was frightened by the talking Slappy, but the puppet helped him win thunderous applause. Looking at Sarah clapping, Harold felt that the puppet was a blessing from heaven, so he followed in Nathan's grandfather's footsteps, gradually becoming a puppet under Slappy's control. Harold became irritable and would talk to the puppet incessantly. Concerned that things couldn't go on like this, his parents decided to burn Slappy in the fireplace, but the puppet wouldn't catch fire. Then Harold returned, rushing to the fireplace to rescue Slappy, and under the puppet's spell, he even turned his parents into puppets. Later, at the 1993 graduation performance, Harold took the stage with Slappy. Unexpectedly, the puppet revealed secrets about Sarah and others, causing them immense embarrassment. After the performance, an upset Sarah confronted Harold, asking why he would betray his friends. But Harold, already brainwashed by Slappy, believed Sarah befriended him only to feel superior. Sarah couldn't understand why he would think that way, but suspected the puppet was the root of the problem. She noticed that ever since Slappy appeared, Harold had changed, so Sarah and her friends planned to steal Slappy away and destroy it. As dusk fell, they rang the doorbell deliberately to lure Harold out and then quietly sneaked into the house to steal the box. To their surprise, Slappy suddenly became furious and caused a power outage in the entire house. An anxious Harold quickly lit some candles and stumbled into the basement. Seeing this, everyone gathered to knock on the door, trying to persuade Harold to stay away from the puppet. Unfortunately, he slipped and fell down the stairs, and the candle ignited a disaster in the basement. Sarah and the others couldn't open the basement door, so they grabbed the box and fled for their shitty lives. To avoid ruining their futures, they chose to hide the night's events and buried the puppet in an old mine shaft. This was the true story behind the fire that year. After hearing Nathan's story, the group was shocked, but also relieved. Thankfully, their parents didn't intentionally commit murder. The real culprit behind everything was the evil puppet, Slappy. Unable to hold back, Nathan revealed that he had been possessed by Harold's ghost all along, and even to this day, he still believed Slappy was his good friend, and that it was Sarah and her group who were the real murderers. Nathan's intention in telling the story today was to let the kids know the truth about their parents. Unexpectedly, they thought Slappy was the murderer. Just then, Margot, Sarah's daughter, asked how he could know all this. Upon hearing this, Harold revealed his true form, saying that it's time to bring Slappy back before disappearing into thin air. Margot and her friends wanted to leave, but they forgot that this place was not the real world. They had entered through a scrapbook, which Harold had now taken with him. They were unaware that the possessed teacher, Nathan, had used their phones to send messages to their parents, saying they were staying overnight at a classmate's house. Then, he went to find Lucas's mom, who had just been discharged from the hospital. It was she who suggested burying Slappy years ago. Later on, Harold, using Nathan's body, retrieved the box from the mine, but didn't find the puppet. He demanded that Lucas's mom hand over Slappy, but she panicked, ran out of the elevator, and escaped. Lucas's mom rushed home, packed the puppet in a bag, and at that moment, Margot's dad came to visit. Not being part of the group from that year, he was unaware of the puppet's significance. His visit was merely to invite Lucas's mom for a meal, but she hurried out with her bag and left town in her car, unaware that a red car was quietly following her. Margot's dad felt Lucas's mom was acting strangely, so he went to ask Isaiah's dad what was going on, saying he felt like he was hiding something. Hearing that Lucas's mom had taken the puppet, Isaiah's dad hurriedly drove away from home, leaving Margot's dad dumbfounded and confused. Meanwhile, in the scrapbook world, the kids heard a strange noise coming from the dining area. They wondered if there was someone else in this house. They quickly armed themselves for protection. To their surprise, the next second, Nathan appeared. It was the consciousness of the real Nathan, who had been trapped here for a long time, searching for a way out. Just then, Isabella spotted light peeking through the bottom of a door. She opened it and looked down to see what appeared to be a house at the end. The kids quickly tore down the curtains to make a rope, hoping to get closer to the light source. Isabella volunteered to go first, possibly because she's the heaviest among the group. She tied the rope around her waist while the others held on to the other end. They established a signal. 1 tug meant all was well, 2 tugs meant pull her heavy body up immediately. Once everything was ready, Isabella slid down the rope into the abyss. To her astonishment, the light led to a school, but it was clearly not their current school, for she saw Harold's locker with Sarah's photo still inside. Suddenly, she heard laughter nearby and walked into the theater where she saw the audience seats filled with dolls, likely humans transformed by a spell. Isabella felt scared and quickly tugged the rope to signal her return. Sensing this, Harold ripped the school page from the scrapbook, causing the illusionary campus to start collapsing. The others felt Isabella's 2 tugs and attempted to pull her back into the room, but as they pulled, the fabric of the makeshift rope slipped, and teacher Nathan, at the end, crashed against the doorframe. This collision temporarily sent him back to his physical body, and he found himself sitting in the red car that was tailing Lucas's mom, with the scrapbook on the passenger seat. With it, he could save everyone. However, he was quickly snapped back into the illusion. Back in the scrapbook world, Isaiah was pulling hard on the rope as the fabric threatened to tear due to Isabella's heavy body. Thankfully, they managed to pull the heavy Isabella back up in time. Isabella relayed everything she had seen and heard below to the rest. On the other side, Isaiah's father and James's mother drove together to the mine. Both were members of Sarah's group back in the day. Isaiah's father, clutching a rope, descended into the depths to see if the puppet that was buried there was still present. However, he found nothing. Above him, he heard James's voice, but it wasn't the real James. It was a counterfeit created by Harold. The imposter released his rope, trapping Isaiah's father in the mine shaft. James's mom waited listlessly in the car for Isaiah's father until she thought she saw her son's figure. Unaware that this was a fake, she hurried out of the car to check on him. To her horror, the counterfeit James picked up a stick, intending to make her pay for Harold's death. It was only then she realized this person wasn't her son. Just as the fake James was about to strike, Isaiah's father miraculously appeared. Apparently, he managed to climb out the mine shaft. Together, they dealt with the imposter and realized that Harold's ghost had indeed returned to seek revenge from them. The scene shifts back to the teenagers. After the earlier collision, Nathan suddenly discovered a way out. He asked everyone to hit him. Isabella rolled up her sleeves and pounced on their teacher with punches, and Nathan indeed returned to his physical body. He found that Harold was tracking Lucas's mom, but his time back was fleeting, and the next second he was pulled back into the illusion. Nathan informed everyone about the tracking, and hearing that her mother was in trouble, Lucas punched him back into his physical body. This time, Nathan quickly grabbed the scrapbook, but the Harold inside him struggled fiercely. Both fought for control over the body. In the scuffle, the scrapbook was flung into a puddle, and subsequently the house in the illusion began to leak water, and the walls slowly deformed. The 5 of them moved to the second page of the scrapbook because of the water seeping through the paper. Nathan rushed out of the car to fix the situation, but his right hand, controlled by Harold, wouldn't let go of the car door. Nathan bit the back of his hand in desperation to free himself. Still, the Harold-controlled right hand stubbornly refused to give up, trying to stop him from retrieving the scrapbook. Passers-by who saw Nathan rolling on the ground fighting with himself thought they had encountered a madman. At this point, the group of 5 had made it to the basement, where they unexpectedly encountered Harold's parents, who were waiting to leave with their son. As they spoke, Nathan pulled out a pen and located the page in the scrapbook that depicted the teenagers. He drew a door on it, and through this, they managed to escape the illusion and return to the real world. However, Nathan couldn't break free from Harold's control and was once again locked away. Meanwhile, Lucas's mom was still driving, gradually ascending into a high-altitude mountain area. Snowflakes began to swirl around, prompting her to stop the car outside a wooden cabin. She changed her clothes, grabbed a shovel, but just as she opened the door, she was greeted by a policeman. He had come to patrol due to the blizzard and was reminding residents not to wander around recklessly. He noticed Lucas's mom was tense, with a burlap sack behind her, and insisted on checking it. Reluctantly, Lucas's mom emptied the contents of the bag, and the dismembered parts of Slappy fell to the ground. Seeing this, the policeman left, reassured. Harold, still inhabiting Nathan's body, was rushing on his way. At the mountain checkpoint, Harold lied, saying he was following a friend's car but had lost them halfway. The same policeman from before overheard Harold describe his friend with blonde hair and kindly offered directions. However, the officer wouldn't let him pass due to the poor road conditions. Every vehicle needed snow chains to proceed. Harold turned back, but rather than returning to town to buy snow chains, he parked his car on the side of the road, preparing to take a shortcut on foot to rescue Slappy. The teenage group was also tracking Lucas's mom. Halfway there, they spotted Harold's red car and footprints someone had left by its side. Lucas recognized them as the path leading to the cabin, and worried for his mother's safety, he ignored Margot's objections and plunged into the forest. The others, anxious about leaving him alone, decided that Margot and Isaiah would follow, while James and Isabella stayed in the car to wait. Meanwhile, Slappy's severed head wouldn't stop chattering, pestering Lucas's mom to put him back together. Unexpectedly, she used tape to seal its mouth shut. As Lucas's mom carried Slappy out, she caught sight of Harold ahead. She rushed to her car and locked the doors, but when she tried to start the engine, it wouldn't turn over. In his urgency, Harold shattered the car window and grabbed Lucas's mom by the collar. In that critical moment, the car finally started, and Lucas's mom reversed wildly, barely managing to shake Harold off. But then, her luck ran out again as the car died. She had no choice but to escape on foot with her bag, while Harold, dragging his injured leg, pursued her. They raced along the mountain road, with Harold soon lagging behind due to his injury. Risking her life, Lucas's mom dove into the woods. When Lucas and the others arrived at the cabin, the two were nowhere to be seen. Lucas, frantic with worry, immediately entered the forest. The snow kept falling. Lucas's mom hid behind a large tree to avoid Harold, who was in Nathan's body and shouting not far away. Only when his voice faded did she pick up her bag and continue running. But she hadn't gone far when Harold suddenly lunged to snatch the bag. Lucas's mom kicked him away and scrambled up to keep running, their life-and-death chase unfolding in the snow. Meanwhile, James and Isabella were deep in a discussion about relationships and gossip, even getting hungry in the midst of it all. Just then, the parents' group arrived at the scene. James's mom, seeing her son, was hesitant to approach, fearing he might be an imposter. After James spewed some choice words, she was convinced it was indeed her real son. Isabella's mom also rushed to embrace her daughter, and the young and old headed together towards the cabin, with Isabella spilling all the recent events along the way. Elsewhere, Lucas was still searching for his mom, calling her name loudly. Exhausted to death, Lucas's mom thought she was hearing things when she heard her son's voice, but as the familiar voice drew closer, she quickly responded. Neither could see each other's position. They could only move towards the sound. Lucas's mom, watching the figure limping closer, stopped in her tracks. It was the relentless Harold. Drained of energy, she hadn't gotten far before Harold caught her by the nape of destiny. He snatched the backpack, threw Lucas's mom into a snowdrift, and hurriedly dumped Slappy out, then ripped the tape off its mouth. Lucas and his two companions had been wandering in circles for ages, cautiously making their way along the cliffside. Isaiah, with his arm in a cast, found it particularly difficult to maintain his balance. In an unlucky moment, he took a nasty fall. By the time the others realized he was missing, they had completely lost each other. At that moment, Isaiah was clinging to a vine with a sheer abyss beneath his feet. Meanwhile, Lucas and his group were about to turn back when they stumbled upon an abandoned bag on the ground, and his mother was lying below. Fortunately, she was unharmed. Lucas woke his mother and told her he knew everything. They had to stop the evil Harold. The mother and son embraced in a tender moment, realizing they could only rely on themselves. In a desperate act of bravery, Isaiah struggled to climb the vine up the cliffside. After an arduous effort, he managed to pull himself to safety. Harold, delighting in his misfortune, picked up a stone and was about to hurl it at Isaiah. Just then, Lucas's mom caught up. She implored Harold to snap out of it, to stop letting Slappy control him. Sadly, Harold was beyond reason at this point, and the situation was dire for Isaiah. In the nick of time, Margot called his nickname, which his parents had used when he encountered them in a vision. This term of endearment brought back a flicker of sanity to Harold. At that moment, Sarah and the others arrived at the scene. She told Harold that he was once her friend, a dear and intelligent friend. They actually wanted to save him back then. It was a good thing Isaiah was an athlete with a strong build. Otherwise, a few more minutes of chat and he would have been a goner. In the end, it was Harold's guilt towards his parents that awakened Harold. He turned around, pulled Isaiah to safety, and then hurled the evil Slappy off the cliff. Following this, Nathan expelled Harold from himself. Sarah, looking into the eyes of Harold, who was frighteningly transformed, confessed her feelings and affection for him. Harold regained his original form before vanishing, with his parents' spirits coming to guide him on his way. Nathan came to his senses, and everyone helped each other down the mountain. Below the cliff, the shattered Slappy opened his eyes once more, indicating something fishy. The scene flashes back to 6 months earlier when Nathan was teaching in Portland, but was underappreciated and had complaints from students leading to his dismissal by the principal. The landlord came around to gently press for rent, and after much pleading, he was given a 3-day extension. Then his beloved dog was killed by a car. Just when Nathan thought all hope was lost, a real estate company informed him that he had inherited his great-grandfather's estate, which later led to many unexpected events. Fortunately, now Nathan had a home and a job, allowing him to live out the rest of his days in peace. He planned to write a novel about his recent experiences to fulfill his dream of becoming a writer. Nathan drafted a story with an ending where 5 brave youths returned to their mundane lives. Isaiah, the baseball player, was in rehabilitation, with his father hoping he would return to his peak form. However, after so many incidents, Isaiah was reconsidering his commitment to baseball. As for James, he and Isabella had become inseparable friends. But James's recent romance had Isabella feeling a sense of abandonment, and Margot was finally moving on from her unrequited love for Isaiah, slowly accepting Lucas's affection. Everything seemed perfect, but this was just the ending Nathan had imagined. Reality was bound to differ. For instance, Margot was considering moving to Seattle with her mother, which Lucas and Isaiah were saddened by but did not show. Soon, the publishers contacted Nathan, saying they were pleased with the story, but thought the ending could be more exciting. They suggested delving further into the story of the puppet Slappy to leave readers wanting more, potentially leading to a whole series of books. Nathan was thrilled, but without a frame of reality to guide him, he couldn't write a creative ending. So he decided to go for a drive to seek inspiration. He drove aimlessly along the main road and found himself heading towards Seymour Mountain, the very place where he had discarded Slappy. A terrible thought surged into Nathan's mind, prompting him to enter the mountainous area in search of the puppet. There it was. He finally found the lone puppet lying ahead. Blinded by a desire for success, Nathan actually brought Slappy back home. He pulled out a piece of paper from inside the puppet's clothing, took a deep breath, and read the incantation. But the puppet didn't react. Nathan laughed at himself mockingly. However, the moment he turned around, Slappy reassembled and came back to life. Slappy declared that now he would give him the best ending ever. As soon as the words were spoken, the stuffed dog on the wall miraculously came to life. The pet dog led Nathan into the woods, gesturing for him to dig. Nathan wanted to joke with it, but it suddenly bared its fangs with a ferocious growl. Meanwhile, Isaiah and the others planned to send Margot to Seattle for the weekend, turning the trip into a road adventure. Lucas was in low spirits throughout. The group of 5 quickly arrived in Seattle, where Sarah helped the kids rent a large house to ensure they had a joyful weekend. Isabella wanted to go buy ice cream at the corner and pulled James and Lucas to join her. This left Isaiah and Margot alone at home, creating an awkward atmosphere. Isaiah asked if she had made up her mind about really moving to Seattle. Margot expressed her desire to start anew, especially since her father was forming a new family. The only thing she couldn't let go of was Lucas. The next day, Margot and Lucas went to buy donuts. She wanted to have a serious talk with him, but their plans for the future were diametrically opposed. Margot longed for the distant city life, while Lucas only wanted to inherit his mother's harbor shop after graduation. They simply weren't on the same path. Margot took everyone to her cousin's party in the evening. Lucas, surrounded by strangers, found himself missing the comfort of Lawrence Port more than ever. He cherished the life there and couldn't deceive Margot about his feelings. Their disagreement escalated into a full-blown argument, and Lucas left the party alone. When Margot and the others returned home, they discovered he hadn't come back, finding only a note on the table with apologies. Meanwhile, Nathan unearthed a coffin from the earth, and following Slappy's instructions, he recited an incantation. Visions of a great fire flashed through his mind, and at the moment the spell was complete, the puppet lost its magical powers as its true form entered the coffin. A gaunt corpse emerged, quickly regaining a healthy human form. Just then, Isaiah's father came looking for Nathan. With a mere raise of his hand, the mysterious man named Kandu turned him into a puppet. Back in 1879, Kandu was merely an ordinary soldier who had been shot in the stomach and knocked down by cannon fire. By a twist of fate, he stumbled into an underground space. Clutching his wound, Kandu stood up and suddenly smelled kerosene. He quickly used his lighter to ignite it, revealing a stone wall covered in densely packed spells and a carving that resembled a high tower. At that moment, one of the spell lines shone with a golden light. Kandu tried to recite it aloud, and in the next second his gunshot wound healed miraculously. Kandu immediately noted down all the spells with pen and paper. In 1885, he arrived at a carnival in New York and entered a doll shop. The shopkeeper recognized him as a famed magician, a title Kandu despised. With a casual wave, he brought a wooden puppet to life to show the shopkeeper what real magic was. Kandu declared that he would turn this quiet carnival into the liveliest place, but the shopkeeper must help him build a wooden tower. A year later, the carnival was thriving, but the shopkeeper noticed something off about Kandu. He was turning the audience into puppets and spoke of conducting some ritual. Realizing things couldn't continue this way, the shopkeeper, having picked up a few spells throughout the year, helped create Slappy to distract Kandu. While Kandu was admiring his work, the shopkeeper attempted to turn him into a puppet. However, Kandu stabbed the shopkeeper in the stomach. With his last breath, the shopkeeper recited a spell to seal Kandu inside Slappy's body. Now, with Kandu freed from the puppet, he was determined to complete the ritual he started years ago, to transform 1,000 living people into puppets, place them on the spire, and burn them as a sacrifice. At this moment, Lucas returned home only to find his father, who was supposed to be dead, alive and well. Frozen in shock, his father explained that he was the key witness in a murder case and had faked his death to assist the police. Lucas struggled to believe this until his mother confirmed his father's story. However, just as he longed for his father's embrace and moved to hug him, he was turned into a puppet by Kandu, who had taken on the guise of his father while controlling Lucas's mother to stage the whole act. Soon, other friends experienced similar encounters. Isaiah had just returned home when he was greeted by the coach from the University of Washington, offering him a full scholarship contract to join their team. With his parents' eager eyes upon him, Isaiah felt compelled to take the pen and sign. However, he suddenly noticed a scar on his wrist had vanished and realized something was amiss. Meanwhile, James was stopped by the woman of his dreams confessing her love, and Margot discovered her estranged parents reuniting, almost crying tears of joy. Fortunately, Isaiah arrived in time to warn Margot that it was all an illusion. As soon as he spoke, Kandu revealed his true form, and Margot's father was shown to have been turned into a puppet. Isaiah and Margot hurriedly fled, just as James and Isabella arrived by car, having seen through Kandu's ruse. Isabella explained that she knew something was wrong the moment she got home, and her mother greeted her in an uncharacteristically warm manner. Now, the four of them planned to rendezvous with Lucas, but found his house empty. As they were frantically searching, Lucas zoomed past on a motorcycle. They quickly jumped into the car to follow him. They chased into the night before finally catching up to the other party. To their dismay, they discovered that Lucas had been turned into a puppet. Just then, the controlled parents arrived at the scene and captured the children, taking them to the square near the towering spire. All the townspeople, except for the four teenagers and Nathan, had been turned into puppets. At that moment, Kandu appeared, bringing them back to the old battlefield, and stood before the wall full of inscriptions. He declared his intention to complete the sacrifice of 1,000 souls, to open the gates of hell, reshape the world, and create a homeland without war. Kandu left them with an order to kill them, then left the tent. The pet dog, hearing its master's command, immediately went into battle mode. Nathan had not expected things to come to this. He quietly took the pen from the table and destroyed the pet dog's illusion. Nathan decided to stop Kandu, save the villagers, and atone for his sins. Nathan did have a way to stop the ritual. It turns out his great-grandfather was the puppet shopkeeper of the past, who had left behind a pen with the solution recorded within. The scene shifts to Kandu, about to ignite the spire and burn the puppet inhabitants inside. Unexpectedly, the shopkeeper emerged from the tent, declaring that the children's spell had revived him. Just when everyone hoped for the shopkeeper's magic to shine, he suddenly changed his tune, telling Kandu that it was his own short-sightedness in the past, and now they could work together to rebuild a perfect world. The shopkeeper then took the torch and lit the wood beneath the spire. Kandu watched the flames with a smile, but in the next second, he turned into a puppet. It turns out it was all an illusion created by the spell. The shopkeeper was actually Nathan transformed. Everyone quickly searched for the spell to revive the villagers, but Kandu suddenly returned to normal. Isaiah, holding the spell book, warned him that if he made a move, he'd burn the book. Kandu was indifferent because he knew the spell by heart. He slowly approached the spire and black fog engulfed the youths. Isaiah found that the spell book could break the fog. He broke free, passed the book to Margot, and then lunged at Kandu to buy time. Margot frantically searched the spell book and finally found the restoration spell. All magic instantly vanished, and Kandu reverted to his bullet-ridden form. Suddenly, the souls he had wronged reached out from underground to drag Kandu back to hell. In his panic, he pulled out a gun and began firing, nearly hitting Margot, but Isaiah quickly stepped in to take the bullet using his bulletproof muscles. Eventually, Kandu was dragged into hell to serve Satan, and the villagers returned to normal, except Isaiah, who remained unconscious. A sorrowful Margot sat outside the hospital room, willing to pay any price to awaken Isaiah. She recited the spell from the spell book to call him back. However, the drama abruptly concludes with Nathan being once again possessed by the evil Kandu. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.